And today, this afternoon, well, in the morning we recited in English, so the afternoon we do Tibetan. Namdam Dita says so Sam Jaja Chiva Nyebe Nyame Draganta Kajula So Kajula Manam Jirvadzina Nanta Gamba Shin Sen Gula Chajam Sen Tajube Chena Yeku Shamba Neba Shin Mega Shin Kashar Tobe Made Majur Kanjore Gonchena Gonja Nanda Jian Mai Jian Cha Sadhu Chatsa Dan Chi Shabatan Jesu Ram Kushin Sayi Jungze Dagi Samba Tamje Dagi Chanju Chi Ho Sashi Perju Jushi Me Do Tam Vira Lingji Ni De Jamba De Sangye Shindu Me De Pu Drogu Namla Shima Jubra Jo Semche Namgi Sambadam Loi Chera Jita Var Chejun Tumon Tamba Chugi Ko Zo In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Gurus. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now please think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, that is, all sentient beings throughout space, who, because we have had an infinite number of past lifetimes, and we've had mothers in many of those lifetimes. They have all been our mothers at least once, and if they've been our mothers once, then they've been our mothers an infinite number of times. So we have this intimate connection with all sentient beings from past lives. Even if you think about it in terms of this lifetime, I mean, there's no way we could exist without all other sentient beings, even the ones we don't like. It's just the nature of interdependence. We're all dependent upon each other. And so in this way, all sentient beings ultimately have done us, and are doing us great kindness. And because they are doing us and have done us great kindness, then we should think that we need to do whatever we can to bring them great benefit. And that benefit is the lasting happiness of Buddhahood. Any other happiness is temporary. And so please think to yourselves that we need to bring all of these sentient beings to the lasting happiness of Buddhahood. And in order to do so, we need to develop prajna. Prajna born of listening, prajna born of contemplation, prajna born of meditation. So today, in listening to these teachings, you're hopefully going to develop some prajna born of listening. That means that you're going to listen, you're going to hear, you're going to think a little bit, you're going to get a general idea, have an understanding of some degree. Some more, some less, you're going to have the understanding to your own degree. And it doesn't matter whether it's more or less. It's the question is, do you have some understanding? And when you have that understanding, that is the prajna born of listening. Then you can contemplate that and meditate upon it, and thus develop the three types of prajna. So that is the goal of our teaching and listening today, so that we can all take another step down the path to Buddhahood. So thinking in this way, with this motivation, please listen to the Dharma this afternoon. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the is the Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. The Way of the Bodhisattva has 10 chapters, and we are discussing the 9th chapter, the chapter on transcendent prajna, which opens with the discussion of the discussion of the benefits of bodhicitta. And then the next section of the text is the discussion of the two truths. And there's the presentation of the two truths, and then there are objections to the two truths. So in the objections to the true truths, there are the 6 objections to the relative that we covered this morning. And this afternoon, we're speaking about the 2 objections to the ultimate. Or to put it another way, and this morning we spoke about the different objections raised by the foundation vehicle, and this afternoon we're speaking about the objections raised by the mind-only school. So this morning we were talking primarily, we finished in the middle of the discussion on the mind-only, the true image mind-only school. So what do we mean by image? The image means a cognitive image. All of you people who've been through therapy school or whatever, psychology, or read about neuroscience, you've heard about cognitive images. That's what we're talking about. Except, as I mentioned before, here it is talked about as something that's mental, not something that's produced by mind, or not produced by brain. It's a mental, it's an image of the external objects. And that there are 2 images. There's the objective image that we see outside, the subjective image that is actually feels like the seer, the perceiver, the hearer, the smeller. That those 2 images if we have a thought, we have what we're thinking of, and then the thinker. And so we have those sort of 2 aspects, and it feels to us like we're knowing something when it's actually that because the thinker and the thought of, or the seer and the seen, are actually both part of mind. It's mind knowing itself, so it's self-awareness. We spoke about that this morning. And we spoke about how self-awareness, if the mind is real, the mind cannot act upon itself, right? Because just as a sword cannot cut itself, or your finger cannot touch its own tip, In that same way, the mind cannot act upon itself. We also started speaking about how the mind as being self-luminous, illuminating itself. The example or the analogy given in the mind only is that it's like a lamp. The lamp lights other things, but it doesn't need to light itself because it's already lit. And so in the same way, the mind is self-illuminating in that it makes itself known. So it makes itself known, and there doesn't need to be anything else to have the mind make it known. So when you think about luminous or illuminating in Buddhist texts, often it's talking about the quality of knowing, making things known or knowing things. So we have all these analogies of light in Buddhism. If you're studying Mahamudra or Dzogchen teachings, you hear lots about things about the luminous nature of mind. And as Trungpa Rinpoche says over and over again, it means knowing. It means that you can know. It doesn't necessarily mean light literally, but it's like an analogy. And it's a very common Sanskrit way of speaking the word prabhasa, as I mentioned before. Okay, so that's where we got to this morning. And so today, this afternoon, we've come to the next part. We're continuing the discussion about the luminous nature of the mind. And so the objection that the mind-only school says that the mind illuminates itself, and then Shantideva replies, the mind doesn't illuminate itself because there's no darkness to be dispelled. Illuminating makes something that's dark, makes it light, so it can be seen. But the lamp itself, like the candle flame itself, or a lamp flame itself, or the actual bulb in a torch and a flashlight. Sorry, I've spent too much time in Asia. And I keep on saying torch when I should say flashlight. Or if you have your little tiki torch, your tiki torch is, you've got the flame of the tiki torch is also, it doesn't light itself because it is already light. There is no darkness for it to dispel. And so the response of the mind only, and I'm going to maybe go through this a little bit quicker. Unlike a crystal, blue does not depend on something else for blueness. Likewise, it seems that some things depend on something else and some do not. So here what they're saying is the mind is naturally luminous. It illuminates itself, and it doesn't depend on anything else to be luminous. The analogy is if you have two things. You have a pure crystal, colorless crystal. If you put that on a blue cloth, because of the blue cloth, the crystal is going to appear blue. So the crystal appearing blue is because of the condition of something else, that is the blue cloth, right? If you put a red cloth, it would appear red. If you do whatever, it depends on the cloth that is underneath it. That determines the color of the crystal. But there are other things. There are some gemstones, like, for example, the favorite one, Vedurya, they say in Sanskrit, beryl. Some people translate it as lapis lazuli, which is not the right translation, but it doesn't matter in this case. You have lapis, blue beryl, sapphire, any of those gems. They're just naturally blue. You don't have to put them on a cloth to make them blue. You put them on that silver stone on your finger, and it's going to be blue, right? Because it's just blue by its very own nature. So they're different things. Some things are just naturally blue. Some things have to be made blue. And there's some things, likewise, that depend on something else to be lit, like, for example, when you're going down into your basement and looking at your furnace, right? It has to be lit by something else. That's your flashlight. But the flashlight bulb itself, when the flashlight is on, doesn't depend on anything else. That doesn't depend on it. It's just naturally light. Or a candle flame. When there's a flame on a candle, that flame is naturally light. It doesn't need anything else. The candle is illuminating your romantic dinner at a restaurant, but it's not. So it's illuminating that. So the illumination of your white tablecloth underneath the candle is going to depend upon the candle, but the candle being light doesn't depend on anything else. So this is what the mind-only school says in response, saying, so therefore it's possible that there's a mind that doesn't depend on anything else to be luminous. It doesn't depend on causes and conditions. It's just naturally that way. That's the nature of the mind. It's naturally luminous. And so Shantideva's response is here in the last two lines. A thing that is not blue itself does not itself make itself blue. You have the blue crystal that's sitting on that blue cloth, That blue crystal isn't making itself blue. Something else is making it blue, the cloth, right? So the mind, and if you look at the mind actually, or if you look at a candle flame actually being light depends on a lot of other things. You've got lots of different other causes and conditions that make it come together so that it can actually produce light. Depends on causes and conditions. If you have your blue gemstone, your vidri or beryl, or if you have your lapis or you have your sapphire, those depend upon the causes and conditions that made them blue. It's not just that it makes itself blue, it's that it's blue because of its causes and conditions. So the analogy here that the mind only given doesn't actually conclusively prove or persuasively prove that the nature of the mind is self-luminous, because that also depends upon causes and conditions. So something doesn't act on itself, it needs other causes and conditions. The mind needs other causes and conditions to make it aware and knowing. And if it's going to be luminous, there has to be some sort of a quality that makes it, some sort of a cause or condition that makes it luminous. It's not just some random part of its nature. The other point is that, then the mind only says, well, you know, you look at the mind and it's just like you look at a lamp and you know that the lamp is blue and you say that you know that lamp is luminous. In the same way, you can look at the mind and you say it's luminous. But so Shantideva says there is a consciousness that knows and says a lamp is luminous. But what is it that knows and says that mind is luminous itself? So when you are looking at a lamp, you've got that candle flame or that lamp flame, that bright flame, and you are looking at it and you say, oh, that is luminous. You are looking at something else. But when you have mind looking at mind, as we were describing before, mind does not see mind itself, because it's like, you know, sword can't cut itself. So what is it that's saying that mind is luminous? So what is it that knows, what is it that sees the mind as being luminous, and what knows it? So this is another, essentially the same argument as before. So then Shantideva goes on to say, whether it's luminous or not, if it's not seen by anything, like the charms of a barren woman's daughter, even discussing it is pointless. There's no point to talking about the mind. So you could say the mind is luminous, you can say it's self-aware, whatever you want to say about the mind. If there is nothing seeing the mind, mind cannot see itself, as the Buddha said. So what's knowing that the mind is like that? You can't talk about it. There's nothing that actually sees the mind. So what point is there in talking about it? It's like the charms of a barren woman's daughter. So, or should this be, is this childless in the, anyways, a woman who doesn't, I'm trying to remember which version of the root is this IV, maybe it was a slightly old version. At any rate, a barren woman or a childless woman has no children by definition. I mean, she might have adoptive children, but that's different. Here we're talking about natural children, or what do we say? Birth children. Birth children. Okay. I'm not good on the current, I'm going to say all sorts of politically incorrect things because I spent too much time in Asia. Sorry about that. So you can't talk about, there's no, childless woman has no children, no birth children. So you can't say her birth children are charming or that they're terrible, or you can't say anything about them because they don't exist. You can't say anything about the children. So then the next point is that this mind-only school says, be that as it may, there are some proofs that there must be self-awareness, that the mind must know itself. And the first of these proofs is that we remember things. You can only remember something if you have experienced it, right? If you have not experienced something, you cannot remember it, right? For example, if you have never been to Timbuktu, you cannot remember your visit to Timbuktu. If you have never been to Poland, Maine, you cannot remember your visit to Poland, Maine, because it didn't happen. You've never been there. You can't remember it. You have to experience something in order to remember it. So we know that everything that appears to be external is actually just a manifestation of mind or an image to the mind. Something experiences it, and that is self-awareness, they say. So as Shantideva summarizes it, if self-awareness doesn't exist, then how is consciousness remembered? So you remember, oh, I saw this, or I heard this, I knew this, whatever. You can remember something. And Shantideva's response, this is one of the most cryptic lines in the whole chapter, or couplets, a triplet in this. When something else is experienced, it is recalled from the connection, like the venom of a rat. Okay, so sorry. This is not so clear to us these days, right? But basically the point is that memory happens because of causes and conditions in the mind. There's some connection that then produces a memory cognition in the mind. At first, you're not remembering something, then some other condition, someone says, do you remember the time that we went to Poland, Maine? And then because of that condition, you then remember, oh, yes, I went. So there's a condition, a connection. There's some sort of a connection that reminds you, and that produces the memory. You don't necessarily need to have some real existent self-aware mind in order to remember that. There's connections. It comes through causes and conditions. Like the venom of a rat. So the venom of a rat, this is, first of all, the venom, I was going to say like the poison of a rat, but that's kind of, when I translated it, I started out with poison, but it occurred to me quickly that we were going to think about rat poison instead of something else. So I used the word venom. So it's like when a rat bites you, and then there's poison in that. So I think that poison here probably refers to the fact that rats' saliva has probably got all sorts of, what do we say, nasty things in it. And so you get bit by a rat, and then it can get infected because of the saliva, and then you get sick and possibly even die, especially if you're in India pre-antibiotic era, right? So that's what we mean by the venom of a rat. So how does this relate? Well, there are two different versions. The slightly more common version, well, there's several. There are many different versions in the different commentaries, but there are two that I'm going to speak about here. The first one is the one that's given in the Panjika, which is one of the most famous commentaries on the Way of the Bodhisattva. The commentary on difficult points to translate the name. And this commentary says, if you get bit by a rat in the winter, you've got the bite, but it doesn't immediately make you sick. It's only later in spring when there's thunder. And when the thunder rolls, then you get sick from the rat venom. So that's the first one. It's also a little bit difficult, but the point is that there's some other condition. And it's really hard to get our minds around this because it's like such a totally different understanding of illness than we have these days. We're thinking of bugs. We're thinking of bacteria and viruses, probably bacteria in the rat's saliva that then make us sick. Well, how does that depend upon thunder? But in ancient India, they didn't have the benefit of modern medicine. And so they thought, well, it takes a while from the time you've been bit to the time you get sick. Oh, and there was thunder before you got sick, so therefore it must have been because of the thunder, right? That thunder was the condition that made the rat venom kill you, right? That's one story. Is that clear? Basically, it's saying there is the initial event, and then it manifests and makes you sick when there's another condition. Similarly, there's the initial event, and whether there's self-awareness or not, later there's some connection that then reminds you and causes a condition of memory. And in fact, you can remember perfectly well, you can have very vivid memories of going to Poland, Maine if you've never gone there. You just have false memories, right? There are other conditions that can make you have memories of things that didn't happen. If you've ever been in relations with people and you have memories of things and you remember it one way and they remember it completely the opposite, who's right? You can't tell. So our memory is not at all reliable. We're not remembering things the way that we experience them. We're remembering them the way they happen to get stored in our mind, but not the way they actually were, right? So the memory depends upon the conditions that then ripen as there's a connection, condition that makes the memory arise. Now, the second story is a good one. So there's this rat and there's a snake, cobra or some other venomous snake. And the snake says to the rat, you're not much of anything. If you bite someone, they're not going to die. But if I bite someone, they're going to perish quick. A deadly or a painful, agonizing death from snake poison. So the rat says, no, it's not like that. It's completely because of thought. Let's do a test of this. So they're going to do a scientific experiment. The rat and the snake are waiting by the side of the road. This guy comes along, and the rat sneaks out surreptitiously and bites him on the heel. And then the snake slithers out from the grass, and he sees the snake, and he thinks, I've been bit by a snake. And because he thinks he's been bit by a snake, he keels over and dies. Okay. And then the next time, the next guy comes around. I think they must have, I don't know what they did with the corpse, but at any rate, this next guy comes down the road, and the snake sneaks out and bites him on the heel, slithers back in the grass. And then the rat jumps out, and the guy sees the rat and says, bit by a rat. It's nothing. I'm going. He just walks along, keeps going. No problem. So the rat says, okay, see that? It all depends on how you think about it. It depends, in other words, it depends on conditions again. If you think about it the right way, then it happens. But if you don't, then it doesn't. There's some connection. The connection of seeing the snake makes you think you've been bit by a snake. The connection of seeing the rat makes you think you've been bit by a rat. But there's connections. The memory does not, therefore, this is a very strange example. I'm still telling you partially because it's a great story, a little anecdote. But it's kind of, saying you've got a connection that makes you have that idea, oh, I've been bit by a snake or I've been bit by a rat. Similarly, you have a connection, some condition that makes you think I'm remembering, that makes you have a memory and think that it's a memory. So that's the point. So that's the first proof of self-awareness that comes up in the mind-only texts. And I mean, I do have to say here that actually Shantideva is being pretty dismissive of this. They have some very interesting proofs of this and discussion about this in some of the mind-only texts, and also in the texts such as the commentary on validity, the ascertainment of validity by Dharmakirti, and so forth. But I'm not going to go too far into epistemology. Stop me before I get too far, because it would get. But there's more to this proof than Shantideva's refuting at this point. It's a little bit more subtle than that, but still, the point the mind only is making is that there has to be a real mind in order to have experience. And Shantideva's point is that it doesn't matter if there's a real mind or not. The condition happens, real mind, illusory mind, and a memory happens, whether that memory is in an illusory mind or a real mind. It doesn't matter if the mind is real or not. This memory itself is not proof that the mind is real. It's proof that there's some sort of experience, but it doesn't prove the, I'm thinking of a philosophical word. It doesn't prove the ontological status of the, it doesn't prove that it's real or not. Right? Okay. Now, the other proof of the mind only is that there must be a mind, because there are people who have done dhyana meditation and developed clairvoyant powers. This is actually very commonly described in all of the different levels of Buddhist scriptures, that when you achieve a certain level of stability of mind, you achieve the clairvoyant powers, and one of those is telepathy, knowing other people's minds. Right? So there are yogis who have meditated and who can perceive other people's minds. As it says in verse 24, it's seen by those with other conditions, so it illuminates itself. So people with other conditions, that is, people who have the power of telepathy, can look at someone and say, they're having this sort of mind. So there are lots of stories about this in the sutras. The story about the Buddha, something will happen and the Buddha will sit in meditation and look and see, or Shariputra or Moggallana or one of the other great arhats, one of the bodhisattvas will sit in meditation and look and see what other people are thinking, know their mind. So because great beings who have that power of meditation are able to know other people's minds, they see the mind, therefore there must be a mind and it illuminates itself. So Shantideva's reply is, he uses an analogy. It's like when you have magic eye salve that helps you. The eye salve helps you see things that are far away or that are blocked by something else, things that you ordinarily couldn't see, like a treasure vase that is buried underground. So you put the eye salve on your eyes. It's kind of like, you go to the drugstore and you get yourself your dry eye medicine. This time it's like magic eye salve that you put in your eyes, and you can see the treasure vase underground. As it says here, when magic eye salve is applied, you see a vase, but not the salve. You've put the stuff on your eyes, and you're looking out, and you can see the treasure vase, but you're not seeing the salve on your eyes, let alone seeing your own eye. The eye cannot see itself. You can't even see, if you put eye drops on in your eye, you can't see the eye drops, and they might make your vision blurry for a few moments, but you can't see it. So it's different. So when someone is knowing someone else's mind, is engaging in telepathy, they're knowing someone else's mind, but not their own, right? So it doesn't prove the self-awareness. So here, what Shantideva says is, at this point, is that when we are negating all of this, we're not negating experience. We're not negating even that there's some degree of self-awareness. We're not negating that people know things. We're not negating that there's some luminosity of mind. We're refuting that it is real. And when we talk about real, it's, as we discussed about last night, something that is singular, autonomous, enduring, unchanging, doesn't depend on causes and conditions, something that you'd look at and say, that's there, it's really there. Instead, it's just like this shifting mass of causes and conditions, interdependence, that appears in various ways, and we give it the name of mind or self-awareness or whatever we want to call it. So what Shantideva says is how things are seen or heard or known is not what is rebutted here. Here it's the cause of suffering, the thought they're true, that is refuted. So when we're talking about refuting the mind-only position, we're not saying people don't remember things. We're not denying telepathy. We're not denying any sort of experience that anyone has. What we are denying is we're saying it's not true, because when you cling to something and say, it's real, it's true, it's something that's going to help me, it's something that's going to harm me, I want it, or I want to get rid of it, that is what causes suffering. So we need to overcome that thought of clinging to things as being real. So that is why we're undergoing all of this. It's not to refute anything else. The mind-only school is a really fascinating philosophical school. I mean, I haven't read much about it. I haven't studied much. Mainly, what is in the works of Dharmakirti and then in the works of some of the other Tibetan masters. But there's also a lot of other mind-only literature, and it's very interesting. So here we're not saying that the mind-only school is bad, the foundation school is bad, anything like that. And what we're refuting is any level of clinging to reality, clinging to things as being real, saying this exists, this does not exist, saying this is real, saying there has to be a basis for experience. Instead, if you refute that, then you can overcome the clinging. And this is the important part of this, is it's the clinging that then makes us feel greed or hatred or indifference. And that prompts us to act in various ways that then cause suffering for ourselves and others. So we're not doing this. This is not an academic exercise purely for mental gymnastics. We're not trying to learn logic by doing this. We're trying to figure out what is the cause of suffering and how can we overcome it. Now, there are many different ways to approach overcoming clinging, and there are different ways for different people. They all have their own purpose, their own reason. The mind-only school is really excellent in terms of its description of the relative mind, and there are a lot of middle way masters who say, actually, this is a really good description of how the mind works on a relative level. If you say it's true, that's a problem. But if you just say, oh, this mind only is a really fascinating way, a very convincing way of explaining the mind, it's really great. So you use it on the relative level, because it's only through the relative that you can then get to the ultimate. You can't find the ultimate if you don't depend upon, if you don't rely upon the relative. You have to have the relative to find the ultimate. So if you have a good, convincing presentation of what the relative is like that gives you a good understanding of it, excellent. Or if you have the foundation vehicle understanding of everything being impermanent, empty, selfless, and suffering, and you have that understanding of atoms, existent atoms and existent moments of mind, and say, oh, these are real, that is actually a very good way for some people on the path. It's excellent. If you accept that as like your description of the relative and say, well, relatively it appears like this, but ultimately it's not, and that's fine. So when you have there are middle way masters who either take like the middle way, the mind only school presentation, or the sutra school, the foundation vehicle school presentation as their description of the relative reality, but then they teach the ultimate reality according to the mind only. So that's one way of teaching the middle way. That kind of gives people a stepping stone in. This is the way that is described in the ornament of the middle way by Shantideva, which Trungpa Rinpoche always recommends, and is really a wonderful, especially in the commentary by Jumipam, which is there are two different English translations of it. So there's so that's a really excellent, and I think some of you have studied it. It's a wonderful text to study. Or there are other masters who do this. So this who describe the relative according to the foundation vehicle. So this is one approach. And that is a good approach for going through things gradually. To just throw a name at you, you don't necessarily have to remember right now. This is what we call the middle way autonomist school. When we say autonomist, this means what they're saying is that there are ways you can use autonomous reasons in the relative to say that things actually exist. Reasons, in other words, you can prove things relatively. You're not proving them ultimately, you're proving them relatively. But then when they examine the ultimate nature of everything, they use the same logics that Shantideva does. So that's one approach. Shantideva takes a different approach. He takes what we call in Tibetan the consequentialist approach. Well, we call that in English. In Tibetan, it would be Tajirva. This is actually a term that was made up probably by the Tibetans. And what this is saying is that he doesn't take any position about the relative at all. Instead, he just finds the logical holes in every argument that's tossed towards him. He tosses back some response that shows the logical holes to undercut your understanding. So this is a kind of more jump in the deep end, dive in the deep end sort of approach. Right? So that's the approach that is taught in this. This is also good for other people. In terms of the understanding the ultimate nature, whether you're taking the approach that, say, Kamala or Shantarakshita does in the Ornament of the Middle Way, or Shantideva does in the Way of the Bodhisattva, ultimately it comes to the same thing. It's just a question of which helps you understand better. And in fact, sometimes it's both good to study both. But here we're talking about the consequentialist presentation. I think I can't really speak about the middle way without saying something about autonomist and consequentialist. So that might be enough on that one for now. I don't want to go too far. There's so much to learn and so many unfamiliar things to say, but it's important to at least mention them so that when you study again, we just remember autonomist says that you can use logic relatively, you can prove things logically. Consequentialist says you can't prove anything. There are holes in every argument. Kind of like is it Gödel? Or you can talk about Bertrand Russell's, oh, I'm really going off a tangent here. What is it, the Russell paradox? I shouldn't go on there. I don't know it well enough to say. But basically, any logical system has some point where it breaks down. There is some point where any logical system breaks down. So Shantideva is looking for that point and saying, doesn't work. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so how things are seen or heard or known is not what is rebutted here. Here it's the cause of suffering, the thought they're true that is refuted. This is the main point. You have to always keep it in mind. You have to remember we're not doing this to torture ourselves or as an intellectual exercise. We're doing it to overcome clinging and suffering. So now we have come to the second mind-only school. This is the false image school. Okay, so let's first, before we talk about the text, let's talk about what the false image mind-only school means, because if you don't understand that, it gets really difficult. So the false image mind-only school is basically the same in saying as the true image mind-only school, in saying that you're seeing, when you see what looks like an external object, you've got the objective image in your mind that appears as the external object, and you've also got the subjective image in your mind that seems like the seer or the hearer, the knower, right? So you've still got the two images, and the one knows the other, and so knowing each other, them knowing each other, that is self-awareness. In this way, the mind is self-aware, self-knowing. The difference is this. The true image school says that these images are part of mind and they're real, right? So this is what Shantideva has been saying. If you've got a real mind knowing itself, then that's a real problem, logically. The false image school doesn't say that. It says, actually, those images that appear to you are not real. What is real is the continuum, the luminous nature of the eighth consciousness that just keeps going. And there are various appearances that come up out of that. These are the cognitive images, but they're confusion. They are illusion. They are not real. And so the subjective image and the objective image appear, and they seem real, or they look to us like we're real. We can cling to them as being real, but they're not. The basis of the mind, the subconscious, the eighth consciousness, is real, but the images are not real. So you cannot say that they are the same as mind. You cannot say that they're other than mind. You cannot say that they're both same and neither. You can't say that they're neither the same nor other. You can't really say anything about it. It's kind of ineffable, but there's this confusion, or this illusion of an image in our mind, and that's what our relative truth is. When you do meditation and you realize the nature of the luminous nature of the eighth consciousness, this is sounding a lot like Mahamudra, but there's some important differences. When you realize the nature of the luminous self-aware nature of the eighth consciousness, you really realize that, then the confusion of the images ceases, and they just sort of dissolve down into the continuum of the eighth consciousness. And then you just rest in equipoise, that is, in meditation, in the self-luminous, self-aware continuum of the eighth consciousness. And this is said to be like the ultimate state. This is the nature of mind, is that eighth consciousness that truly exists. But the cognitive images that appear to us don't. Now, in terms of the sort of level of subtlety of this view, it is more advanced than the true image school. It's a slightly more subtle, there's slightly less clinging to it, but it is also one that is much harder to actually say is true. It's really hard to, there's a really big problem in it that Shantideva points out. He basically dispenses of this school in a stanza or two. He doesn't have as much to say about it as he does about the true image, because it's got a really big logical problem. But in terms of meditative experience, it's actually a very, very advanced, very good school. It's just really like one step away from Mahamudra or Dzogchen. The difference is, if you have any clinging to the continuum of the eighth consciousness as being the continuum of the subconsciousness, the ground consciousness, if you have any clinging to that as being real, then you're not really realizing the nature of the mind. So often when we talk about when people talk about the Mahamudra view, the Dzogchen view, or the Shentong view, or we talk about Buddha nature, or so forth, you have to be really clear to yourself in your meditation. Are you actually seeing the nature of it? Or do you have some sort of subtle clinging to, when you're doing meditation and you have an experience of clarity, you have an experience of luminosity, you have an experience of something, because we have various experiences in our meditation. You have an experience of something. Do you have some sort of subtle clinging to that as true? This is actually a very, very important point, a very easy, what do we say, a very easy pitfall to fall into. To think that you're meditating on the ultimate truth, but actually have some subtle level of clinging, in which case you're basically on this level of the false image mind only, even if you don't have all of the philosophical apparatus that describes it, but that's basically where you are. So this is an important point for us to understand. When we talk about, for example, the Uma Shentong, the Shentong Madhyamaka view, where you emphasize that everything is empty, but it is still luminous. This is a very important view, and it's a basic view. It's one that Trungpa Rinpoche speaks about all the time. But sometimes you see these really strident Shentong texts that say that the luminous nature exists. It is true, it is real. And if you don't understand what they're saying, what they mean by existing and true, because they're using that word in a different way than we use it. So there's this experience that people sometimes have in their meditation where you experience some sort of level, basic level of luminosity, basic level of self-awareness in your mind, and you mistake that for the self-aware wisdom that is the actual Mahamudra and Dzogchen, without really looking at it and seeing, do you know it? I mean, if you're at that point, then what's really important is two things. Is to go to a qualified master and get some really good instruction in that, which is really not easy, because basically people these days primarily teach Mahamudra and Dzogchen on a fairly surfacey level. It's hard to get really detailed instructions on it. And the other thing you need to do is really supplicate your gurus. I mean, this is the Kagyu answer. You have to really have intense devotion. And the more intense devotion, the more intense your compassion, then the more likely you will be able to break through that subtle level of consciousness. So until you are able to find a guru or a retreat master or someone who's able to bring you to that next level, you have to really supplicate as much as you can. Such intense devotion that the thought of the guru just, brings tears to your eyes, makes you feel goosebumps. If you have that level of intensity, which means you have to develop a relationship with a guru, which is not easy also. So it takes a while, but you can only develop a relationship with a guru if you start out having faith. You have to be open. That's what faith is, right? Feeling open. You've got to, faith is like defined in the Abhidharma as like clarity of mind. It's just sort of clear, not talking about clarity in terms of the luminous clarity, but just sort of a pure, clear. I often think of it as actually being like sincere, a very sincere feeling. When something is sincere, is kind of pure, right? And so that's the quality of mind. When you have that sincerity, that pureness, and you think of someone, so Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche or the Gyalwang Karmapa, and that's for me, or Mingyur Rinpoche, or Dzira Kongtrul Rinpoche, or Kanda Rinpoche, or whoever it is for you, and you feel, or Sita Rinpoche, and you feel, that's the beginning. And then you supplicate, and the more you supplicate, the more you pray. The more you supplicate, the more devotion roars. The more devotion roars, the more the blessings soar. The more the blessings soar, the more the jewels of realization come showering down from above, to quote loosely from the Four-Session Guru Yoga by Mikyu Dorje. So you've got to have that devotion. So this is the path for us if we don't have access to the guru, if you want to do it in terms of your meditation practice. The other thing we need to do is you need to be really careful about your study. And if you can understand the points of the Madhyamaka and understand, this is why it's not saying not something, not nothing. This is what we mean by the logics. And you have that conceptual understanding, that will also, then you're sitting in meditation and you have an experience of something, and you can say, this is what it talks about in the Madhyamaka text. This is the pitfall it talks about. This is the quality it talks about. Then am I on the right way? Am I not? So that's the other reason for engaging in the study. We're not doing this merely to give ourselves a hard time. And I have digressed. I'm going to have to skip over some parts pretty quick, but we'll have to go back to the back here, refuting the false image mind-only school. So after that digression, to remind you, there is the self-luminous, self-aware continuum of the eighth consciousness, and then the confusion arises as the subjective and the objective images, but they cannot be proven to be anything. They can't be proven to be same or different, or both same and different, neither same nor different as the eighth consciousness. So then Shantideva says, if you think that illusions are neither other than mind nor the same as it, if real, then how are they not other? So the mind is real. If the mind is real and they're not, then how are they not other than the mind? And if they're not other and they're not true, then the mind itself must also not be real. You can't have something, something can't be both the same as and different. I mean, a glass of water and a cloth napkin, are they the same or are they different? They're different. They can't both be the same and different, right? There's no way they can be the same and different. They're different. They can't be the same. If you have a cloth napkin and a paper napkin and a cloth napkin, are they the same or different? Different. Could they possibly be the same? No. So if this is like an illusion that comes out of the cloth napkin, they're neither the same nor different, then they have to be either the same or different. So if the paper napkin comes out of the cloth napkin, does this make any sense? If the paper napkin comes out of the cloth napkin, and they're either the same or different, then if they're the same, then the cloth napkin would have to be paper, or if they're different, then the cloth napkin would be cloth, and this could be paper. It can't go any other way around. So if you have images, if the cognitive images are confusion and false, but they're not necessarily different, not necessarily the same, you can't say either. You have to say they're one or the other, because they can't be both, they can't be neither. That's just illogical. See, same and different are like, what do we say? They are mutual exclusions. They're complete mutual exclusions, and that there's no way something can be either it's the same or it's different, and there's no third alternative. So you can't say that. That's what Shantideva is saying. So either if the mind is real and they're the same, then the cognitive images have to also be the same. If the cognitive images are different, if they're not this, or if they're the same, then the cognitive images have to be real. If they're not different and the cognitive images are false, if they're confusion, then the mind also has to be confusion. You can't have it both ways, essentially. So what's seen illusion is not true, and neither is the seer mind. So Shantideva's response here is that if the cognitive images are false, if they are untrue, if they're confusion, then the mind that sees them also cannot truly exist. It cannot be like this real continuum, real existing self-aware, self-luminous continuum. Now, if you say that it is an illusory self-aware, self-aware, self-luminous cognition, excellent, no problem at all. Go for it. But when you say that that continuum is real and the images that are not separate, neither the same nor separate from them, are different, then you can't. It doesn't work logically. So that was talking about both the false image and the true image schools. And then we've come to the second of the objections to the ultimate. The first is that there would be no basis for illusions, and the second is that there'd be no basis for experience. Okay, so the illusions is talking primarily about the cognitive images, self-awareness, self-luminosity. So here we're talking about just the fact that you experience something. And here it's really coming down to the main point. You just have this feeling like, if everything's illusion, then then what are you experiencing? It couldn't possibly be an experience. As it says, samsara must have a real basis, otherwise it would be like space. If there's no real basis, then how could you possibly experience anything? So in the mind-only school, they say there is this eighth consciousness. It is true. It is real. It has substantial existence. And because of that it's there, then we can have experience in the relative world. So how does so Shantideva's response is, how does being based on the real mean the unreal performs in action? For example, if you have a rabbit horn, right, not a fabulous jackalope horn, a rabbit horn. If you have a rabbit horn, no matter what you put it on, you still can't use it to stab anything. Get a nice real handle for your rabbit horn and use it to stick something, it's not going to work. because there's no rabbit horn. No matter how real the basis, the unreal is never going to be real. So in the same way, if that is the case, then you have this real mind. There's no way the unreal can do anything, and so there's nothing the mind can do. It'd be the mind, this mind of yours with no companion would be entirely alone. There'd be nothing but the mind. There wouldn't be any basis, any ability to have any experience at all, just that self-aware, self-luminous. And if there's just that self-aware, self-luminous continuum of mind, then there'd be no experience at all. Or alternatively, when mind is free of the apprehended, then all become tathagatas. In that case, what's the benefit of thinking there is only mind? So here, it's like in the false image school, they say, when you realize that the images are false, and then they subside into the continuum of the eighth consciousness, at that point, they call that awakening to Buddhahood. That's when there's no more feeling of an apprehended, when there's nothing apprehended, that is no objective image, then there's nothing apprehending it, so there'd be no apprehending image or subjective image, and they both dissolve into the eighth consciousness, and that would be Buddhahood. So if that happens, but this happens also when you don't accept that the mind is real, actually. When you don't have the clinging to the mind is real, for the middle way, it's the same. When you realize that there's nothing being apprehended, there's no apprehender, there's no object, no subject. You can only have a subject if there is an object. You can only see something if there is something to be seen. If there's nothing to be seen, there can be no seeing, and therefore no seer. So when you realize there's none of that, and it all dissolves into just emptiness, then that's Buddhahood. So this works perfectly fine, even if you don't say that there is a truly existent, even if you don't say that there's a truly existent mind. So there's no point in saying that that there is the mind-only school. So that's discussing the objections to the ground. And so now we've come to the section of proving that illusoriness is the path, proving that understanding the illusory nature of all phenomena, meditating on that, including the mind, understanding the illusory nature of illusory phenomena is the path to overcome the afflictions, overcome our clinging, and then awaken to Buddhahood. But there's a problem, and there's an objection that comes from from either the mind only or from the foundation vehicle school, and they say, wait a minute, you're saying everything is illusion, but knowing things is illusion doesn't necessarily stop you from feeling attraction to it. But how does merely knowing that all is illusion stop afflictions? Illusionists may still feel lust for dreamlike lovers they create. So the objection here is they're saying, okay, so you've got someone who's really good at making an illusion, and they create an illusion, but they create an illusion of like a dreamlike lover. So they make a beautiful woman or a beautiful man. They have some image or a beautiful whatever. I'm not going to exclude anyone, but whatever you find beautiful, they make an image of that, and then they know it is an illusion, but they still feel lust. The same way as people can see photographs and still feel attraction or lust for a photograph, or for a movie and still feel attraction and so forth. You know that it is a movie, but you still feel attraction. So that proves that merely knowing that things are illusion does not necessarily prevent you from feeling afflictions such as lust, right? So Shantideva's response is that yes, these people know that they are looking at an illusion, but they still have such strong imprints of the afflictions, that is, of greed, hatred, delusion, and so forth, that they still feel them. Their makers have not yet abandoned the imprints of afflictions toward known objects, so when they see them, their imprint of emptiness is weak. That illusionist has never has not done enough meditation on the middle way. So they still have the habits of reacting to beautiful images with lust, images of beautiful people with lust. So the fault here is that they haven't done enough meditation on emptiness, because they still have clinging to things as being real. Even when they see something they know is an illusion, they still don't entirely know it's they don't, not entirely convinced in the depths of their heart. They still think, oh, I can get some sort of pleasure from this, or they get some sort of excitement out of looking at it, right? And so this is a question of them still having a lot of imprints of clinging. So they need to meditate more. Ingraining the imprint of emptiness eliminates the imprint of things. By meditating nothing as exists, it also is abandoned later. So, in other words, you have to train your mind and ingrain the imprint of emptiness in your mind. We have so many eons from beginningless lifetimes of attachment to things as real that it takes a long time to overcome them. Like if you have been studying the middle way for 10 years, sounds like a long time, but compared to an infinite number of lifetimes, it's pretty short, right? So you have to work hard at it. You have to really keep meditating. You have to keep looking and thinking and being mindful, aware, careful of your mind and thinking about things being empty in order to be able to overcome those imprints of clinging to things as being real. So you meditate on the emptiness of phenomena, meditating on how things are empty, what that means that they're empty. Now, we haven't gone into how to meditate on that yet. That's going to come later. Maybe we'll get to it starting in the afternoon tomorrow. I don't know. That was the plan. At any rate, by meditating on things not truly existing, not existing, then that eliminates the imprint of things. The imprint of things, meaning the imprint of things being real, existent, and so forth. So you meditate on emptiness, and that decreases the habit of thinking. In other words, you make the habit of thinking that things are empty and illusory, and that replaces the habit of thinking that things are real, things that you want or things that you don't want. So you meditate that nothing exists. You start out by saying, there is no form, there is no feeling, there is no conception, and so forth. It's like it's in the Heart Sutra. It says, no form, no scent, no taste, no touch. What a mystery one. No form, no scent, no form, no sound, no scent, no taste, no touch, no dharmas. No eye, no ear, no nose. Know this, know that. There's no this. So, because first of all, our attachment is to things as being really existent. You think that there really is something there. You just habitually think there is something there. You look at these flowers, especially those of you who are here are real. It's harder when you're looking at it over Zoom because it looks like it's something on the Zoom screen. But when you are looking at something real, you say, are these flowers really here? Are they here? Yeah. I mean, just naturally, it looks like there are flowers here. We don't look at them immediately. And we have to kind of remind ourselves, oh, these are emptiness. They're neither, they're neither single nor multiple, blah, blah, blah. You can use whatever logic you want. It's really hard to get to that. So you have to meditate. What is this flower? Do these flowers, do they really exist? You have to spend the time thinking and examining. Now, you don't necessarily need to start from flowers. You start wherever you're instructed to do or whatever. You can meditate on various things. It's often good to start with your own body and so forth, as we'll hopefully discuss tomorrow. But by meditating in this way, then you see that there really aren't any flowers. So there's nothing there. These are flowers. They look like flowers, but there's nothing real. So then you come to the idea and say, oh, there's nothing there. Nothing exists. There's no flower there. But that idea of nothing depends on the idea of a thing, right? For example, I was going to say something on my table, but the people watching over Zoom cannot say that. So, what do we do? There is no parrot on my shoulder, right? Parrot on my shoulder does not exist. There's no parrot on my shoulder, right? There's nothing there. Nothing on my shoulder, well, of my clothes, but on top of my clothes, what is there? There's nothing. That idea of a parrot, no parrot on the shoulder, depends on the idea of there being a parrot on the shoulder. If there are no parrots, there can't be no lack of parrots, no absence of parrots. It depends on the other. So when you prove that something does not, okay. So when you're proving that there is no parrot on my shoulder, what you're actually proving is just an idea, just a name, no parrot on Khenpo David's shoulder. There's no thing on my shoulder that is nothing, the absence of a parrot. Because if there were the absence of a parrot on my shoulder, there would also be the absence of elephants, the absence of nuclear submarines, the absence of Mars. None of that's on my shoulder. And then I'd be really weighed down by all these absences. But there's nothing there. When you say that it's nothing, actually saying nothing is just a word. Oh, gee, I really shouldn't go here. I've been spending too much time studying epistemology. So, like when you say that there is nothing there, what you're proving is a designation. You're not proving any actual thing. Nothingness cannot be proven because there's nothing there. There's nothing that you can say is nothingness. Where's the nothingness of the parrot on my shoulder? There's none there. So you're proving a term. And so when you look at it, when there's no idea of a parrot, so there's nothing there, and then parrot on my shoulder, there's nothing there. That idea of there being no parrot on my shoulder depends upon the idea of a parrot on my shoulder. One depends on another. That also goes away. So when you are meditating and you say that there is no form, therefore there's nothing. Form is emptiness. Form is nothing. Form is no form. When you say form is no form depends upon form. Because you cannot find any form, there therefore cannot be anything to depend upon it. You build a ladder out of rabbit horns, and you still cannot climb it because they can't support any weight. There's nothing there. So that nothing depends on something, right? So because of that, that idea of there being nothing then just also naturally dissolves. When one says nothing exists, the thing that's being examined isn't observed. So when you say no parrot on my shoulder, there's no parrot observed. When you say no form, no feeling, no scent, no sound, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, no ear, no nose, no touch, no body, no mind. When you say none of these, those all depend upon, no a form, a sound, a scent, and so forth. Because there are none of those, then we say there's none, but there's not actually anything that is none. And that also isn't observed. And because there's no basis, how can nothing remain before the mind? So in this way, you first have to overcome your attachments to things as being real, because that's the main thing that prevents us from achieving, it's the main thing that keeps us in samsara, I should say. It's the main mechanism for developing craving, is you think that things are real, that they're going to help you and you want them. You think that they're real, you think they're going to harm you and you want to get rid of them. And so because of that, you have to say, they aren't there, they aren't real. And when you realize that they aren't there and they aren't real, then because of that, you're free of the clinging to them. But at the same time, if you get to that point, there's no form, no sound, no scent, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, well, everything is included in that. Well, okay, I should go back. When you say no form, no scent, sound, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, no ear, no nose, no body, no mind, then you've got 12. That includes everything. There's none of those, right? That means there's nothing. But clinging to nothingness is even more stupid than clinging to thingness. As Sarda has said, clinging to things as real is as stupid as an ox. Clinging to nothing is even more stupid than that. So we can't cling to nothing either. You have to remember that nothing depends upon something. If there's no something for that nothing to depend upon, then how can it remain before the mind? So you have to overcome all your clinging to either thing or nothing, existent, non-existent, both, neither. And then only when you do that, then you can't understand it. So Naturally, this happens in the course of our meditation. When you're burning a log, when the log has been completely burnt out, what happens? The fire goes out. When you do the meditation on emptiness and you get to the very end of it, you've got this you realize that everything is nothing, then there's no basis for nothing, and that clinging also naturally will that clinging will also die down, because there's no basis for how can it remain before the mind? How can you conceive of nothing when you have no thing to relate it to? So how being free of attachment leads to achieving the Dharmakaya. And then when neither thing nor nothing remains before the mind, because there is no other way, there is no focus, utter peace. You've meditated that there is nothing. You realize because there's nothing, there can't be, that because there's no thing, there can't be any nothing. It dissolves, and you are able to cut through all of your clinging. You're able to eliminate all of the obscurations entirely. Because you're eliminating all the obscurations, then all the qualities of realization naturally arise, and you realize what we call the Dharmakaya. Because there's no other way. It's either something or the thing or nothing, existent, non-existent. If it's not either, there's no other way than it can be, so there's nothing to focus on. So focus is like when we're looking at, if you're looking at your water glass, you look at the water glass and your mind is focusing on the water glass, kind of like focusing a camera, focuses on that. But there's nothing to focus on. Because there's nothing to focus on, there's no focus, that habit of clinging to things as self or other and so forth dies down. All of the habits of that completely die down, and you develop the realization, you develop the wisdom of a Buddha, which is what we call the Dharmakaya. And that is the utter peace. Absolutely no conceptual activity, no conceptual activity, no non-conceptual activity. You cannot see anything. There's nothing to see, nothing to hear. There's no nothing to see. It's like there's no thing, no nothing. You cannot say anything about it. And you see this, it's when you awaken to Buddhahood, you see this, but you don't really see it. There's nothing to see. It's emptiness. There's nothing to be seen. And yet you see this in a way without seeing. You see without seeing. This is inconceivable for us ordinary individuals. It's kind of hard. So we say these kind of strange words that sound a little bit like mumbo jumbo: seeing without seeing, hearing without hearing, knowing without knowing. But for the experience of a Buddha, there's nothing to be seen, but it doesn't cease. As Trungpa Rinpoche always says, when you awaken to Buddhahood, when you realize Mahamudra, whatever realization of emptiness you have, you're resting in emptiness, you're resting in the nature of mind. It does not mean that you become a rock. You still have the qualities of knowing. You still have the qualities of the luminous nature of the mind. It's still there. You see without seeing. There's nothing to see, but you can see it all clearly. There's no way of seeing anything that you can still see without seeing. So it's a different sort of state, something we cannot really understand for ourselves. So this is the nature of the wisdom of a Buddha. So here, in many commentaries, it doesn't go into a lot of detail on this. And Pautsu Trengwa's commentary, it does go into a fair amount of detail, because actually, when you think about it, here what we're talking about in the next few verses are really, what is a Buddha? How does a Buddha appear to people? How does a Buddha perform activity? I was actually hoping to get to this about an hour ago. So we're going to have to speak about this a bit tomorrow morning, but we'll start with talking about the Dharmakaya, the wisdom of a Buddha, because this is important. There are some parts that we're going to have to skip through a little bit quickly, but this is kind of important. So when you talk about the Dharmakaya of a Buddha has many different qualities of wisdom, and when you talk about it from our sort of myopic way of looking at a Buddha, we talk about them as being different qualities of wisdom. You could talk about it in terms of the Buddha's 10 powers, the four the 4 fearlessnesses and the 18 unshared qualities. But that's too many things for a list for our particular course today. You can talk about it more simply as the Buddha's qualities of wisdom, love, and power. Power, the quality of wisdom. So at the point that someone becomes, that you become a Buddha, then your mind ceases. But it's not nothingness. So in particular in our Kagyu tradition, and it might be this way to some extent in the Nyingma tradition, but it's really fairly characteristic of our Kagyu tradition. What we say is that actually mind ceases at the moment you achieve Buddhahood. And after that, there's just wisdom. In many texts from the Yogacara school, it says that the consciousnesses are transformed into wisdom. We often talk about the 8 consciousnesses transforming into wisdom. You guys have heard about that a little bit, right? This is the same thing. It's saying that consciousness ceases and what is left is wisdom. That wisdom has basically 2 parts. The first part of that wisdom is what we call, this is only from our perspective that it has 2 parts. From the Buddhist perspective, there are no parts to be distinguished. Let's have to be very clear about that. This is seeing utterly clearly and completely the nature of all phenomena. Because actually that nature of all phenomena is the same as the Dharmakaya. It's not different. It's not seeing something else. It's like seeing in some inconceivable way, seeing the nature of all phenomena and realizing that it's our own empty nature. That wisdom of knowing the nature of things as it is. And then the other aspect is that when you know the nature of things as they are, of all things, the empty nature as it is, then you also naturally see the way everything manifests. So you have this other manifest, the wisdom that knows things as they appear. So as the wisdom that knows them as they are, the wisdom that knows things as they appear. So knowing the nature and knowing the different appearances of it. We use different terms, but they're not different. It's like like we were talking about yesterday, when you have appearances and emptiness, the appearances are not separate from the emptiness. So when you awake to Buddhahood, now this is an area of a lot of debate, particularly in the topic of Prajna Paramita. When you awaken to Buddhahood, there is no longer any cognitive images like we have as ordinary people. But that doesn't mean that the mind stops. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily no image. And so whether you're going to say there is an image or no image, like the Buddha, when the Buddha sees things, he or she does not see, they do not see any cognitive image. And yet they perceive as if, they can still perceive as if there were. They still see things without seeing them from their own perspective. The Buddha's perspective, they can see and know everything that's happening, but because they know the empty nature of all phenomena, but they do not cling to it as being this or that or anything. Yet they understand how it appears to others. They also know how it appears to others who still cling to things. So this is the nature of the wisdom of the Buddha. And when they see how things are and how things appear, and they understand that other sentient beings, but for just a really subtle mistake of clinging, don't see that. And as a result of this, experience intolerable suffering as humans. You can think about it however you want. The homeless people in encampments, whether here or in Vancouver or anywhere around the world, frankly. Maybe there are a few countries that don't have so many, but mostly, certainly here in Vancouver, both. Or you can think about the suffering that people are experiencing in Ukraine. You can think about the sufferings of animals, the animals in feedlots and slaughterhouses or in the oceans, and the sufferings of all the beings. And you see these and you understand that it is all because of a very, very subtle and simple mistake. That if only they could just see things a little bit differently, they wouldn't need to experience all that suffering. And so unbearable compassion, unbearable love rises up within the Buddha, and so they feel like they have to do something. So that's the second quality, the quality of love, wisdom, love. And then the third quality is the quality of power. Now, when we think of the quality of power, you might think that it's like being some omnipotent person who can do anything. The Buddha can't do that. As it frequently is said, the Buddha they can't wash away your sufferings with their hands, nor can they transfer their they can't wash away their suffering with their hands. They can't take away your any of your delusions. Nor can they bestow you any boon or any realization. They can't do like some sort of mind meld and transfer realization to you. It's by teaching the peace of the Dharmata that the Buddhas bring freedom. So because the Buddhas have the incredible knowledge, the incredible wisdom, the inconceivable wisdom that knows everything and therefore knows all sentient beings and their capacities, they can teach appropriately for that particular being. The Buddha could look at a sentient being and say something, and then they'd be, oh, that's it. Because they know exactly what's the right time for that. What is the right time to say that for sentient beings? This is making me think of another, I keep on thinking of these verses. The qualities of the Buddha. When you think about the qualities of, how am I going to find it here? I'm getting, how does it go? Boy, if I can't remember it, I can't say it. I can't search for it. So sometimes the Buddhas they know exactly what to say. They see someone and they just teach them the Dharma, and then they realize the nature of things. Sometimes the Buddhas will see someone and know that they're not ready and not say anything. Sometimes the Buddha will see something, say one thing that doesn't really seem to communicate much, but then that person starts to think. And then they go back to the Buddha and they say, what was that? What were you teaching? And then they're ready, because the Buddha knows exactly how to approach each different being. What is going to work for them? What is not going to work for them? This is because, it's the Buddha comes up and does it in the form of what we call a Nirmanakaya Buddha, in a form that ordinary people can say, but it really is based upon the Dharmakaya, the wisdom of the Buddha. This is what we mean by power. Power doesn't mean like an omnipotent creator who can create everything and send you to heaven or send you to hell. The question of power means that they know what is appropriate, but they also know the limits of their power. The Buddha knows that there are certain beings who are just not ready now. So they know when to leave that being. What is that word? I just wish I could remember it. Oh, shoot. I shouldn't be trying to quote from translations I haven't finished and haven't read a number of times that I could try to do this. Anyways. So this is the power of the Buddha, the quality of the Buddha, that the Buddha knows beings and is able to speak to them. This is what I mean power. So there are these three qualities of the Dharmakaya: wisdom, love, and power, the incredible compassion of the Buddhas. Compassion that really goes beyond anything we can say. And it's because of this compassion that the Buddha is able to appear in ways that we are able to relate to, able to understand ourselves. So this is the Dharmakaya of the Buddha. So this is important for us to know. The Dharmakaya is not, it's like the empty nature of all things. It's the same nature as our own nature, actually. And it's the same nature as the nature of all phenomena. We talk about emptiness. You talk about the Dharma nature, the Dharma Dhatu. You talk about the Dharmata, the Dharma expanse. You talk about any of these different names, Mahamudra, Dzogchen. They're talking about exactly this same quality. When you're talking about it as Buddha nature, you're talking about it in that obscured form that's kind of hidden within you. It's like as is described in the Sublime Continuum. There's the analogy of like you have a Buddha statue in the middle of a wilted lotus. You can't see that Buddha statue, but that doesn't change the fact that there's this really beautiful Buddha statue in the middle of this wilted lotus. In the same way, we are occluded by all of our desires, all of our lusts. We are really obscured and we cannot see it, but that doesn't mean that we don't have that same nature inside ourselves. We just haven't realized it. Or it's like the honey in the hive that is surrounded by angry bees. You can't go in and get it because there are so many bees around. You can't get that honey, but it is there. In the same way, we have the Buddha nature inside ourselves, and yet it is hidden by our hatred and our anger, so we're unable to see it. If we can overcome our hatred and anger, then that nature that's already there will naturally come out. This nature is unchanging. It's like a lump of gold that has been buried for eons underneath some poor person's house. Poor person doesn't know that there's this lump of gold underneath their house. And the lump of gold doesn't say to them, hey, get a shovel, dig me up, I'm here. But it's there. A clairvoyant person comes by and looks at this poor person, looks at and knows that they have that a hunk of gold right underneath their house and says, get a shovel, dig this gold up and you'll be rich. The poor person does, and then they're rich and they're freed of the poverty. The gold is the same before it's been dug up and after. There's no difference in the gold. The only difference is that you know that it's there and you can use it. In the same way, we have this Buddha nature inside of ourselves. And when we go through the teachings of the Madhyamaka, eliminate all of our obscurations, and then bring it manifest, then we call it the Dharmakaya. But it's exactly the same. There's no change in it at all because there's nothing to change. You can't see anything. There's nothing to be seen. There never has been anything to see. It does not change. It doesn't matter whether there have been Buddhas or whether or not no Buddhas. It never changes. It's always the same. In the sense that something that is nothing, you can't really say it's the same, but it never changes. And so it's always there. So what we have to do is go through this meditation of meditating, nothing exists, looking for things, seeing, are they really there, following the logic, really being careful about it, not just doing it once, but doing it over and over again, ingraining the imprints of emptiness, overcomes the imprint of things, right? You have to ingrain that. You have to do it over repeatedly. The word for meditation is like the same as making a habit. You have to create new habits in your mind of seeing things as being empty so that you get beyond any conceptual idea of things being empty and actually see that emptiness. And at that point, the Dharmakaya becomes manifest. As you do so, as you eliminate the obscurations that hide the Buddha nature, that hide emptiness, then the qualities that are inherent there naturally become manifest. We talk about Buddhas having qualities of abandonment, the qualities of removing all the obscurations, and qualities of realization, but they're actually not separate, because when you have the wisdom that sees a little bit more of the Dharma nature, then that allows you to, a little bit more of your qualities come out. It's like if you have a lamp inside a vase, at first, if there are no holes in it, you can't see it. You poke a few holes in it, poke a few more holes, and the light comes out and out and out. Then eventually you can take off the whole jug that's hiding the lamp, and you can see the whole lamp. The lamp hasn't changed, but because it is revealed, because it's there, you can use it, you can understand it, it can help you. Similarly, when we have that empty nature that is the union of awareness and emptiness, the union of the wisdom and the expanse, when that is revealed, then we have that full manifest Dharmakaya. And then we also reveal that wisdom, love, and power that is actually, what do we say? Present within us, in as much as something that is not anything can be present, but it's there. So that's the Dharmakaya. So I think that is enough for this afternoon. And I've probably, what do we say? I think I have definitely spoken a little bit longer than the time, but not too much longer, only 4 minutes over time. I don't want to go over too much. So tomorrow morning, we'll have to talk about how the form kayas arise from the Dharmakaya and how these kayas and how these kayas then perform activity. But at this point, I think it's important for us to have a couple of question and answer, but since we've gone a little bit over, and there's also going to be a discussion group in a few minutes, and I'd like to encourage everyone who's already here, if possible, please stay and discuss things in the discussion group, because it's important to work things out and try to do it, especially when it's still a little bit fresh in your mind. So if you're able to stay and participate in that, that is good. But if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Let's do 3 questions today. Yes.
Very helpful outline that you keep displaying on the screen. Where does that come from and how can we get it?
You can ask nicely. The question is, there is this beautiful outline, there's this very helpful outline in the presentation on the screen. Where does it come from and where do we get it? The second question is very easy. You ask for it and I'll give it to you. I can give the organizers a PDF of the presentation so you can all look at that. Where does it come from? It is based upon the outline for Khenpo David Rinpoche's word commentary on the Way of the Bodhisattva. And Khenpo David Rinpoche's outline is based upon Pao Zula Trengwa's commentary, except Rinpoche kind of broke the outline down into more handy sections. Everything he's saying is said in Pao Zula Trengwa's commentary, but he just reorganized it a little bit to make it easier. And then I took that, and I have to admit, I was a little bit free in translating the outline. I was trying to do it in ways that were maybe a little bit less jargon and a little bit more easy for people to understand. So that's where the outline comes from. Are there any more questions or any questions online? We have a question back, Sheila.
I'm so grateful to you for this new translation of prayer for Trungpa Rinpoche's health. But I want, and I would very much like to recite it. But I wonder, I also have old translations of old prayers, that the one that I remember to say often, the one that begins Swasti Vijantu, everything's great bliss, peaceful mind and coming down to. Is it bad to recite the old ones? Should we only recite the new ones? Does it matter?
Okay, so the question is, for those of you listening online, there's the new long life prayer that we recited this morning, but there are also old long life prayers for Trungpa Rinpoche, some that people have known and loved for many years, and then there are also some that are more recent. I mean, there have been, at first, the monks tell me that for many years there is only one long life prayer for Trungpa Rinpoche, the one that the 16th Karmapa wrote, and then there is another, and then another. The Gyalwang Karmapa has written at least 4, if not 5, at least 5 long life prayers for Trungpa Rinpoche. And many other lamas have also written long life prayers for Trungpa Rinpoche. So none of them, they're all good. Reciting the ones for any of them are good. However, in this particular situation, when Rinpoche is having some health difficulties, it's important for us to recite the one that the Gyalwang Karmapa just composed this morning. It's important for us to do that one. So I'd like to encourage you to do that. Even better, if you've had the White Tara empowerment and have the White Tara text, or you can download the White Tara text from dharmaebooks.org, dharmaebooks.org. There's a translation of the White Tara text there. Do the White Tara practice. This is the Gyalwang Karmapa's instruction. Do the White Tara practice, and in the White Tara practice, there is a visualization for long life. In particular, if you're doing the one, there are 2 practices we mainly do. There's one by Jamgon Kontra Lodar Tai and one by Tai Situ Chugi Jungne, or sometimes named Tempe Ninche. They're the same person, different names. So there are 2. If you can do the one by Tempe Ninche, great. If you only have the one by Jamgon Kontra Rinpoche, fine. But there's a long life prayer where you do a longer mantra. Om Tari Tu Tari Ture Mama Ayur Puningyana Pushtin Kores Faha. So you recite that mantra as many times as you can, doing the visualization as it's described in the text and the instructions, as you've been instructed. And recite that prayer as much as you can. And then when you're done with it, recite the prayer that His Holiness has. So if you have had an introduction to White Tara practice, then you should do that. Okay. And my thought also is that tomorrow morning, I'm getting so far behind where I wanted to be, but tomorrow morning, what we will do is I will teach for an hour, and then we will do the White Tara practice together, and anyone can participate together. We'll do it together for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and hopefully finish by 12 so we have time for lunch, right? We'll do it all together, and I will prepare the text. I'll probably just download the ebook from Dharma eBooks and show it in English. Those of you who want it in Chinese, it's also in Chinese on the Dharma eBooks website. So I will look for the address for that and either send it out in a Zoom comment tomorrow morning or something like that, so that all of you who are listening online can look on an ebook on your own. Maybe I'll send it out to the organizers this evening so that you can distribute it by email. So if you want, you can download the ebook and look it on your phone or iPad. If you want, you can look at it on the TV screen. Okay, I will show it on Zoom. So you don't have, if you feel like that's too much for you, don't worry. We'll make sure that it's visible. So we'll do that tomorrow morning to pray for Rinpoche's long life and for him to quickly do that. So if you have if you're able, you can do it yourself tonight. I'm also going to download the texts that I can do it myself tonight. Right. So that's that. So we have one more question. We've had 2 live. Do we have any questions from our Zoom audience? Raise your hand or type a question. No questions? If no questions, then we'll just recite the long life prayers.
That's always kind of the question, but which one are we doing tomorrow? You said there were two, so which one are we doing?
Okay, so tomorrow, I believe, so the question is, which White Tara practice will we do tomorrow? The answer is, I hope to do the Situ Tempe Ninche practice, but if that version is not on Dharma ebooks, then we will do the other. It is? You're looking at it right now. Okay. This is the one that His Holiness specified. He sent out a message that then got distributed. So I received that on a WhatsApp group this morning, his instructions on how to do it. Okay. So I think that is enough for this afternoon. So let me get those long life prayers up and we will get to the beginning. So again, we will start with a long life prayer for the Gyalwang Karmapa, and then we'll recite the prayer for Rinpoche 3 times, once in Tibetan and 2 times in English, and then the other prayers in Tibetan. Okay? Om Swasti Chini Tombe Ngani Le Jutro Ham Zime Tsu Shasum Chagi Shiku Dande Dande Jesu Chon Chida Du Cheng Mitu So Bache Se Chime Tse Fatsu Gi Pade Lame Kutse Sing Tade Shi Chugi Kujan Che Ba Lungche Zo Natsu Chude Zu Gi Duche Mingo Dende Se Gi Lame Kujan Badenje Rison Mimbe Chu Chagi Duche Shing San Mimbra Ze Lama Chosu Miedang Chuson Danden so ye keji me pa me Arms fasted, peaceful car with three faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharmata as a beautiful illusory goddess. O best of gods, please protect us. May the deities of deathless life who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles to life, extend the glorious Guru's life through the always peaceful Dharmakaya, the constant flow of Sambhogakaya, and various emanated marvels. May the Guru's body, firm and stable, with burgeoning life force, live long within the field of vision of us disciples, as a glorious symbol of constancy, and ripen the good field of disciples with the rain of Dharma that matures the three families. Gurus, three jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors of Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this, even a moment, fulfill our prayers. Om Svasti, O peaceful Kaya with three faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharma, as beautiful illusory gods. O best of gods, please protect us. May the deities of deathless life, who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles to life, extend the glorious Guru's life to the always peaceful Dharmakaya, the constant flow of Sambhogakaya, and various emanated marvels. May the Guru's body, firm and stable, with burgeoning life force, live long within the field of vision of us disciples, as a symbol of constancy, and ripen the good field of disciples with the rain of Dharma that matures the three families. Gurus, three jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors of Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this, even a moment, fulfill our prayers. O Lama Kukan Samva Sora Churtu Kutse Sowad Tene Dashi Yela Sora Lama Mepa Jinji Shape Tambadam Kanyam Deki Jomwadam Darshan Tsasam Tichane Sanja Sanja Guru Maho Sanja Now to chen to nam la san je jan se ne ko ji ko de chi ngong sa pa tu ne pa yi de wa chen shi jang xin gang de da ni di ne se pu ju ma ta Yewa Shengi Bama Chuparu Deru Chene Nante Shakon Shor Deke Dagi Nanta Padi Choju Sanje Jansen Tangje Geme Drupa Jinju Lantu Son Tadya Panchendriya Avabhutanaya Sva Chodu Java Seje Gon Soni Zolaji Nanda Gitu Sunge Sapa Kunju Sumla Chupagu Jare Temba Pejur Jigara Sanjim Sanjay Tamju Kitsa Tamje Jidudem Dagi Jula Minju Jini Tanem Tsozote Tsiri Neme Nyanda Tsiri Saju Nanjoraji Namje Sebe Jurma Chandru Tejurji Kene Kene Kache Lutendela Sanje Shom Chandra Kone Jisi Do Tripe Oh, sorry. Oh, where did it go? Oh, dear. I gotta go back. Sorry. Chandra Tone Jisu Jambaro Sunandi Tamje Zipani Tone Chene Kegana Chiba Tru Sipe Sole Thank you all very much. Thank you for listening this afternoon. And I do hope you can take some time for a bit of discussion. I'll be inquiring tomorrow to find out how the discussion went.